It's your girl Naisha Stone, the founder of Carving Stone, your weekly source of positive news. And I have some sad news, but some good news. We are on our very last episode of CNS IG Live with Positive Black Women. We have been here every Thursday of the summer, and honestly, I'm a little sad to see the series go. It's taking a lot of work to be consistent and do this every single Thursday at the exact same time. But it's taught me, how to be a better interviewer, how to be a better business owner, and show more presence. So I'm really excited to have our last guest on here for a while. It means a lot to me to be in it with a black woman who is in media, as me being a black woman in media. I'm very, very excited to bring her on. I'm just waiting for her to log on. Hey, everybody. This is great that y'all joining in. I'm just really excited, and thank you so much for everybody that has been showing up, whether you went to one episode or all of them, stay for 30 seconds or stay for the whole thing. It's definitely been a different experience for me. I did IG Live interviews before, but never this consistently. And so it does take a lot of work, but this is what I'm built for. This is my job, and I love doing it. So thank you all so much. Please remember that this is an engaging IG Live, so when our guest does come on, please make sure to put your questions in the comments. If y'all agreeing with what she's saying, let her know, hype her up. I'm just really excited to definitely be doing this. And yeah, as y'all see, I'm a little nervous. I'm, rubbing on my thighs and stuff. But yeah, here we are, and here she is. Love it. Cool. Let me add her in. 1 second. All right, here we go. Thank you. Hey,
Hi,
how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Well, thanks for joining me.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yes, let me give you the proper introduction. So my name is Naisha Stone. This is Carving Stone, your weekly source of positive news. We're on the very last episode of CNS IG Live with Positive Black Women. And like I just stated before, I'm very excited to be ending with a black woman who is in media. So thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much. And she's with Essence. So Malaika Jabli, oh my God, thank you so much. I just met you a few weeks ago, and you're already here letting me interview you. So I
Of
really appreciate
course.
being here.
And I gotta say, it was your interviewing skills that got me because we were at a media event and I heard you ask a question and you were like completely straightforward. I was like, okay, she's going places. I loved it.
Thank you. Well, when you sent me your bio, I had no clue that you didn't even start off really in journalism. So
Right.
I kind of want to get into that before we get to the Essence role, because I'm super excited about that one. But
Sure.
so you spent 7 years on a New York City Council as a public policy attorney. What does that mean? And, what did you do, and why get into the law field?
I wrote laws, basically. I wrote laws for New York City, for its like lawmaking body. It's called the legislature, in general, but specifically it was the New York City Council. And so we wrote city laws that specifically what I did impacted infrastructure issues. So I worked on some technology issues. I worked on a lot of housing. For a little minute, about a year and change, I was doing housing policy with the land use committee. So they look at who's coming in to try and build something in New York. We know gentrification is an issue everywhere or in a lot of places. And so we tried to figure out some policies to mitigate that. So I did that right after law school. I thought I was going to be an affordable housing developer, completely shifted careers as in terms of like what I do now. But I was focusing on like kind of housing policy.
So back up a little bit. Why go into, that role? And I also have another question, you can answer it later. But how the heck do you write a law, and what does that even take?
So you wanted to know how I took the road into journalism or took the road into law?
Into law.
Okay, this is going to be an even more convoluted story. I started off as I was into performing arts. And so last minute, I don't know if y'all still have this, we had the pre-SAT, so the PSAT.
Okay.
And I was like, I can't put on here that I just want to like do theater. I guess I have to do something more serious as a backup. And so I was like, I guess I'll do entertainment law, but I really want to focus on the performing arts and to be creative. I thought I was going to be an actress. I was acting in movies when I was a kid, actually a movie. Let me not exaggerate. I was in a little movie when I was a kid. And I love to dance and act and all that stuff. But by accident, I was just not really accident, but just last minute decision. Let me just look into law. And then I just kept going with it. So it was like a plan B that became my plan A. And I was like, well, maybe I could be entertainment lawyer. And like literally, I thought I would be Sierra's backup dancer and work as a lawyer for her at the same time. I was like, let me squeeze in.
Oh, man, my brother threw away my CD, her first CD, and I'm still mad about it too.
My goodies. My goodness. Listen, I will go off to some Sierra. But no, like I found out who her attorney was. So I was always a hustler. So whatever it was that I wanted to do, I knew that I was going to hustle with it. Mm-hmm. So I figured out who her attorney was, and I interned for her attorney. And well, her son happened to be a classmate of mine, like, go figure. So I was like, maybe I could slide in and show her my little 1-2 step when I'm looking at this contract. That did not quite happen that way. I just ended up going to law school because, you know, I needed to make sure I have financial security. So I did law and kind of roundabout still ended up in a creative field.
Okay, so before we get into the journalism part, I still want to go back to what does it take to like create a law, and what did that mean for you, honestly, being a Black woman and creating laws? Honestly, that's kind of hard for me to, you know, like.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it is it's a different type of career track that I never conceived of before. But all the laws that we have in our administrative code, or just think, most people are familiar with Congress. So when you talk about lawmakers in Congress and representatives and senators, they call them lawmakers, but generally there are attorneys behind the scenes who have to study, okay, is it legal for us to do this? Like, is there something in the Supreme Court that says that we cannot do this law? So you literally it can go a number of ways. Either a lawmaker can come to you and say, I have this very vague idea. Can you do something about this? Like, and put it in, for New York City, it was the administrative code for the most part. Sometimes they know exactly what they want to write. And so you have a set language. So it's a template, like a model that we have to use. You know, we had it on our little shared drive. Like, these are the elements that you need to put in a bill. So we wrote bills based on this template, but it could be a very long process to know, like, how do you think of language? And I don't want to get too technical here, but like, how do you think of language that is not going to be struck down, where the city won't get sued, where it's clear and people actually understand what the law says? So, you know, I was an English major, so I guess that helped learning how to write and read and interpret. And some of them were really interesting. Like, we wrote a law about like algorithms, and that was like a month-long process, because algorithms can be like the things that predict, you know, in computers, they can be discriminatory. Like, they can discriminate against people. So we wanted to find a law to not discriminate against people. So we talked to experts, and you would incorporate language from like advocates and stuff like that. So I don't know how clear that was, but that's part of the process.
No, I didn't even think about something as algorithms, because that made me even think too, like the tech. And I think I mentioned this before, like how we need to work on the coding, because if you're too dark skinned, like the water won't pop up. So like that, I didn't even think about it, but like the laws, and I'm like, oh my, that goes hand in hand. So no, I love that.
Right. And there are advocates who think about these things on a regular basis. And they, like, kind of with Joe Biden's student loan cancellation plan, there are people who, they put lawyers on their team if you're a nonprofit, and they say, this is how it should be written so that he can actually have the authority to do this. And then they would send it to people like me and say, let's incorporate this, and is this legal, et cetera, et cetera.
So you were powerful. She know what she doing. So that's
a little something. I know a little something.
Okay, well, I'm excited to talk about the media part. So what made you like leave or retire from being an attorney to switching to now I'm going to cover politics?
So it was hard for me to break up. I knew I didn't want to be in the relationship with the law right when I was in law school, but it was holding me down, covering my bills. So I was my hand was forced. And the advice that I always heard, if you're trying to shift careers, is keep doing like what pays the bills until you just do not have enough time to do it anymore, because your side hustle is just occupying so much of your time. And that's what happened with me. I was going to the Midwest. So I'm in Milwaukee now. That's how we met. I was going to the Midwest like on weekends and like when I had like a fall break or vacations or whatever, because there was a really serious political story that I wanted to cover about the 2016 elections.
Okay.
So I kept coming out, and then I was getting pulled. I was kind of getting distracted in a way because it was taking up time, and then some of the other stuff that I wanted to do was taking up time. But within that, I ended up meeting an editor at Essence, and I started writing politics for her. It was around the same time. I was working during the pandemic. I knew I wanted to come out here to do more journalism research. And that editor, even though I hadn't heard from her in a couple years, she had left Essence. She hit me up and was like, there's a job open at Essence. Like, I could slide in the word for you. And I was like, I guess I don't have any excuses now. Like, let me go. So that was just last April when I jumped into it full time. But literally, I put in my 2 weeks notice when they told me, hey, girl, you actually got this job. I didn't even think I was going to get it. So, like, I didn't make preparations.
But congratulations. I know I'm like months late, but like, congratulations. I think that's really dope. Like, you deserve it. And so when you talked about you covered the 2016 election, I was in college and we were covering that. What was the angle you were trying to cover, or like how did you go about covering it?
I felt like everybody was covering the same angle. You know, you have this white backlash against a black president. Why did all these white people not want to vote? And then on top of that, people were still trying to appeal to white Trump voters. Like, since they're the ones who, you know, got Trump in office, like, we have to appeal to them. Like, we need to go to where they are. And there were all these stories about white people suffering from economic anxiety. Like, that was all the justification for why they decided to vote for Donald Trump. But you weren't hearing stories about a different type of swing voter, which are people who were just so disillusioned with the whole process that they stayed home. And it wasn't just black people. You had like younger voters across race who were just like, these options are not working for me. And just looking at the data, Milwaukee, Wisconsin in general was one of those places where it was decided more by the lack of voter turnout than it was support for Donald Trump, because turnout for both white and black people went down. And nobody was really getting that nuance of the story. Like, it's not really that Trump won, it was that Hillary Clinton lost. And she lost key places that Barack Obama had won. So I knew it was more than about white people's economic anxiety. I was looking at black people's economic anxiety. And when I came to Milwaukee, like, people said all types of things. I met this one girl who's actually from here. Her dad is actually like on the school board out here, but I randomly met her in Brooklyn. She was like, you got to talk to my pops. And I was like, okay, let me talk to pops. And I was riding around and I'm like, there are all these like manufacturing, like businesses that used to be out here. And we associate manufacturing with like, you know, blue collar white people, but like a lot of black people held those jobs and those jobs left. You said what?
A.O. Smith, that was like one of the big, that was in Milwaukee.
That the story centered A.O. Smith, and the father who I met, he was a union worker at A.O. Smith. And so like the whole world just opened up to me from that. Cause I was like, look at all these gems. And this is what I love about journalism and studying like covering black people. There are just so many gems in our history that folks on the ground know, but it gets so hidden by all these like other tired stories. And so to me, that was a gem. Like talking to these black union workers where Milwaukee is like 30-40% black. Do people really know that? Like, who knows that? You know? So to me, like that's how I think I answered your question and more, but
the reason I asked, because I was in college, and so I remember, was I in college? No, that was right before I went to college. But when I was there, we had covered why specifically these certain areas, so in Milwaukee or in Wisconsin, why these flip from blue to red is so dramatic. And that was so interesting to me because, like you said, now looking back on it, the angle that they had us kind of pushing for was, why are white people not voting? Because we went into these white rural areas, and first of all, I thought they was gonna be racist as hell. I was scared. But they, the one thing that got to me, they was like, we will vote for Michelle Obama. We just don't want to vote for Hillary. They told me this, I swear, like hunters like holding guns, and I'm like, this crazy. Like when you go really talk to human beings and not just like honestly read an article like we write or whatever, and really go talk to people, that's how I kind of got introduced to politics. And I'm still learning like how the environment works and stuff like that. But what are some key things you can give to like young people to kind of start to get involved in politics, or at least just understand what's going on?
Yeah, that's, you're asking me how people
Yes.
can get involved. Well, I was fortunate to cover one of those organizations, Block. Like what I
Yep.
love, I love being in Milwaukee because there are so many young people like you who are just like doing stuff. Like y'all are really about it. Y'all are trying to make a difference. Block is one of those organizations. I think when I met Angela, she's I think she was the director at the time, still would be the director. I think she was in her 20s, and she was one of the people trying to drive turnout for the 2018 election, like when it came to midterms. So there are groups out there, who are doing this work, and I would say to try and join one that already exists, and that would be like a good one. And then you could probably talk to her, and like young people could talk to her about like what are some other options for them to, put boots on the ground.
Shout out to Block. They sponsored the scholarship before, and I did a fellowship with them before. So shout out to them. They
Hey,
they're really dope. Okay, so you've run for a lot of different people from like Teen Vogue, Fox, and stuff like that. Are there anything you've learned, or what are some things you've learned about interviewing that's kind of different from politics? Because you got to kind of ask questions of politics to understand a little bit more. But what have you learned about just kind of like talking to people?
yeah, I think, and other journalists reiterate this, but I think it's so important to listen. Like, I like to, like, when I interview people, because, sometimes we do IG Lives with Essence, or we have to do video, like pre recorded video. And obviously, like, when we're covering print, I have like the questions that I want to ask, but I always make sure I have room to listen and ask like the follow-up questions, because you hear so many nuggets, and then people are so used to their own story that they don't realize some of what they say might be interesting. So if there's something that like piques my curiosity, I'm like, okay, hold up, back up. Like, what'd you say about that part? And then they go into a whole other thing that's really fascinating. So like that's one of the things that I love about interviewing, and I think some of media advice is to listen what people say and treat it like a conversation. That was one of the like piece of feedback that I got early on, because I would just talk to people like we're having a conversation, like make them feel comfortable. We would like kiki about something else, unless this is like a serious interview and I'm not trying to be that familiar with you. But if it's someone who's like just an everyday working person, like find some kind of familiarity with them, and don't make it feel like an interrogation. Like I'm not trying to look down at my questions while I'm like talking to someone. I'm just conversing.
I'm glad you said that, because that's one thing I try to tell people, like whether journalism or not, you can interrogate people. And I had to learn that myself because I asked a lot of questions and shut up. So like it in a certain way, and like you said, you got to have a conversation with it. That's one thing I learned early on too, is that like I could just sit here and ask you questions all day, but am I actually listening to what you were saying? You were talking about politics, but then you said something about your dad earlier. Not you necessarily, but like so you said something about your dad. Let me go back to that, because there's a reason that you brought this specific person up, and maybe I should focus on that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
One thing I've been noticing, there's been a lot of like podcasts and a lot of people that are branding themselves as journalists or as interviewers. What does it take to be a good journalist, a good reporter, and report on the facts? And, just do a good job on just reporting.
I mean, I think you said it in your question. It's a lot of getting into the facts. So, when I go back to that first piece that I did on Wisconsin, it was based on data. It was based on like actual numbers and statistics of what was going out, instead of just everyone offering their opinion. And like, y'all never even stepped foot in Milwaukee or like Detroit or any of these cities that y'all talking about. Y'all not actually talking to people. Like, that was so bizarre to me as someone who was kind of early in her political journalism career. I'm like, how am I like not a full professional in this, and y'all aren't doing basic things like just talking to the people that you're reporting on? So instead of just like lobbing opinions, and I did that. And I mean, I did do opinion writing. That's kind of how I got a lot of my start, because you have to have a voice. If you're just jumping into something and people don't know you, it's good to have a voice. But after all that, like, you have to get into like, what are the facts at the heart of the matter here? And then you can get into the human interest things, and then you can start adding your analysis. But you got to build on something that is, I think, unique, and hopefully like you could have some kind of authority on it, because a lot of other people aren't talking about it.
No, you hit a key fact. talking to the actual people, I see so many reporters that will not even go meet a person in person. Like, they probably do like all their questions through email. Like, there's only so far you can go with just reading some statistics, some data. Like, you have to actually talk to the person because you can feel the emotion, you can see the emotion, you can literally see their house or whatever. And that's what made the biggest difference for me, because when I entered into journalism, it was just like, okay, just go cover this, and it's like a press conference. My granny cat is over there doing some crazy stuff.
Always a cat. They always trying to sabotage something.
No, I'm like, what are you doing? Y'all not even supposed to be in here. Like, but then that just threw me off topic.
What's her or his name?
You know, she has a lot of cats. I think that's Brooklyn, and then we have over here laid out. But I think that I'm not.
Shout out to Brooklyn.
Yeah, shout out to freaking Brooklyn, whatever. But I forgot what I was saying, so I'm gonna just keep it moving. Essence.
People don't talk to people, and they need to start talking to people.
There we go. Talk to more people. Simple. But Essence. So you're the senior news editor and politics editor. What does that mean? Do you do more writing and interviewing? Do you do more looking over the content, or what does your role entail?
For the most part, it is editing. We've been doing a little bit more writing lately, but as an editor, generally speaking, your job is to kind of think about the direction you want, like your piece of the website. So as news and politics, how do I want news and politics to look and feel with Essence? And so you think about writers who could fit with some of the narratives or stories that you might be interested in. Like, you're a curator. I know that word is I feel like a little bit overused, but you're kind of curating like what you want coverage to be. And so that goes from the website to print. So they call it the editor on record. So when we have print stories related to politics and news, I'm like, okay, what would be a good story for, 2 months down the line? And then you got to think, what could actually still be relevant? Midterms that's kind of an easy one, because, you can do that in advance. So, we think about like, who are fascinating people that we can profile? Who are great writers who can get that story, from the person you want to profile or subject. So you have to commission pieces and reach out to writers and develop relationships with them. And then you get down to actually editing, like line editing, fact checking, going back and forth, the not so fun things with like administrative work and figuring out their rate and invoices and negotiating with them, like how much they can get paid for it. And the website is different from print because it's like an everyday thing. And with that, like, we can get creative in terms of like what kind of video coverage we want to have. So for instance, we did a video at the White House where we covered the Black woman who helped get Supreme Court Ketanji Brown Jackson confirmed. And so, I coordinated, like, I hit up our video team and our photo team. You got to be a project manager in a sense. Like, okay, so can we get everybody on this call? Like, is everybody going to be able to get there in time? Like, the thing starts at 1 o'clock. What are y'all's flight information? Like, are we okay? So it's like a lot of project management. But if you do have a chance to do writing, which I do at Essence, like I had a column. We do some of the daily news things if, our writers can't get to it. So that kind of thing.
What does it take to get covered by someone like Essence, or even just a bigger media company, a national company? I remember asking you that before, but I know a lot of people reach out to me, hey, I got a new business, or I got this. How can I start beginning to get national, global coverage?
Well, you kind of have to make news in a way. So like, to get in the news, you kind of have to make news. And that seems like a catch-22, but something that you do has to be noteworthy. So we cover a lot of like historical things. So if you're the first Black woman who did X, Y, and Z, like, we know what we try and appeal to, what our audience loves, and our audience loves hearing those historical first. If you're the first Black woman Supreme Court justice, obviously. If you're the first, like we covered Pinky Cole, who was the founder of Slutty Vegan. What's up, Atlanta? So she was on the cover because no one was really like making vegan food that popular like before her. So if you're doing something that's like noteworthy in the city that you're in, then you can expect that there might be some national coverage on it, because part of what I do when I look for news is I look to see what local outlets are covering it. Then I'm like, I wonder if enough people know about this. So like, for instance, the Black Holocaust Museum out here, it had closed for a while. There aren't a lot of museums out there like that. And so even though it's a Milwaukee-based institution, a lot of people didn't know about it, I think nationally, let alone, like we said, do they even know Black people live here? And so we posted it, and it actually did really well on the website because we love our history. Like, we love hearing about ourselves. So that kind of thing, if you can make some sort of local waves, then you can expect you might get a shout out in like national media.
And then another thing to add on to that, so when a person, let's say they're getting noticed in their city, should they wait for the reporter to come to them, or should they contact the reporter? And if so, how should they?
People pitch us all the time, and I think part of that is knowing who the outlet is and who the editor is. Like, I get a good number of pitches from like grassroots organizations and progressive groups because they know I like those kinds of stories. I'm looking for those kinds. I wrote those kinds of stories. So get to know the editor that you're trying to pitch to. So on top of the outlet, obviously, you know, we cover Black women. So if you're trying to come to me about like a random white dude, you got to find another outlet. So, you know, and then I think it also helps to look at a news outlet's social media and see what kind of engagement they get. And if you see that there's something that gets a lot of engagement on their website, if you can pitch something that might be similar but with a twist, they're like, okay, well, I know this topic tends to get like good engagement, so let me give this, you know, this person a shot with this story. So yeah, I think knowing the editor, kind of doing a little stalking. And can I give you a quick story about that?
Yeah.
So the way that I even got started getting published is I kind of stalked the woman who became my Essence editor that led to my job, because she first became an editor and a founder of Saint Haran when Solange had her media outlet. Okay. She became editor for her. And I just followed all the Solange editors on Twitter. I was like, I need to see what kind of things they like, where they be at, how I can network with them. One of them just happened to be doing a brunch, like Q&A, around the corner from where I lived. I was like, I gotta go. Like, I gotta show my face. Mm-hmm. So I went there, talked to her, and I kind of just, you have to be a little bit persistent. Like, I asked for her, or she asked me for my contact information, and she actually followed up, but I kept texting her every now and then, like, hey girl, like, I have this kind of background, I could cover something. And then eventually I just needed that one yes. She was like, well, it just so happens that I need to cover something about some European law. I happen to have studied that kind of European law. Wow. And it worked out. So it's not just like knowing what to pitch and who to pitch it to, but building a relationship with people so that they pay attention to what you are trying to say or do.
No, that's basically kind of how I got to where I am. Like, you just kind of, I teach that, like, you can stalk, but don't be too stalker.
Right. A little, just a little stalkeriness.
Because that's how I got DC Young Fly. So I interviewed him like a few years ago, and I was like, man, he popping right now. I really want to interview him. And I just wanted to do an article. And then so I went to his Instagram page. It was actually really easy. He had his PR person in the bio. Click the bio, DM'd her, emailed her. She was like, nope, not right now. So that persistence, my mom was like, because it was like he's going on tour. I told my mom she wanted to interview him, and she found out that he was coming to Milwaukee like some months later. So she was like, reach back out. And it kind of like, worked out a relationship.
And you can't allow, speaking of mom's advice, mamas be knowing. My mom always tells me, like, let somebody else tell you no. Like, don't tell yourself no.
Yep.
The way I eventually ended up in Solange's website after like stalking her various editors, they said no to me a few times. And there was this one that I was like, I don't think they're going to say yes, but let me listen to my mama. Let them tell me no. And it was a kind of like a look back. I called it a retrospective of Outkast's debut album. Because I'm from the A, so I wanted to do something about it. And I was like, this might be too vast. Like, they don't normally cover things this big. Because literally, I went through like a whole history of Southern hip hop. It's like, this is too much. Like, they don't want all this. But I hit them up and she was like, yeah, actually, we want to do this. And then they like had a producer create a whole like playlist to it, so you could like listen to the music that I'm referring to. It was like the dopest thing ever. And that was because I didn't tell myself no. I allowed them to say, you know, take it or leave it.
No, I love it. Like, you just gotta let people say no. Just literally go for it. And if they say no, my biggest thing, I ask why. And if I can fix it, and then I fix it, and then you can't tell me no again. So like,
I love it.
I love it. Kind of a little off topic. What do you do for fun outside of like writing? I know you're retired, you know, attorney, but like, what do you actually?
See, this is a hard question because I love memes. I look at memes and share them with my friends. That's what I do for fun. But speaking of, there was one that was like, you're in your 30s when the hobbies that you had became your side hustle, and now your side hustle isn't a hobby anymore. So writing was my thing for fun, but it became my career. So I don't know, like, what are my hobbies now? I feel like mad boring. I mean, I travel. I don't know if you could call that a hobby. I'm always going somewhere. I do love to travel.
Nice. What? That's fun. What are you talking about? What do you do when you travel? Are you like the adventurous one that go outside and like do the zip line and the hiking and stuff, or are you more like fancy dinners, out for
get you a girl who can do both. I do both.
Yeah.
So,
There we go.
I've done the zip lining things with homies. I like that kind of stuff. I also just like to sightsee and just like view different streets and like urban areas and stuff, and do like walking tours and like learn history because I'm kind of a nerd. I like to do nightlife when I go to different places. So it really varies. But then like if we're doing too much, and I see my homegirl was on here, because we always joke about this. We had a friend who celebrated a 30th birthday in Bali. Hey, Raina. She's also a writer for Essence.
Yeah.
And this girl had us going out at like 6 o'clock in the morning to like at night. I'm like, okay, one of them days I'm not gonna be there. Y'all have fun.
When I'm tired, I'm going to bed. I don't care who got anything to say about it. I'm going to bed, and I do not care. I went to Hawaii last year for my birthday, and we had so it's like 6 hours behind, I believe.
Oh wow, okay.
We had went to sleep, and we were supposed to go out to the club. And so when we woke up, we checked the time. We was like, if it ended at 2 a.m, we are going. I mean, we got up and immediately got dressed and went out. And and it was so late, but it was definitely one of them times that was really worth it.
Yeah, sometimes you can rally. It's all right.
How do you? I kind of go about my. Let me back up. How do you go about finding your story? So for me personally, it's a couple of things. I use social media. I have people send me press releases, but I feel like I'm really good at just kind of driving around the city or just driving around where I'm at and spotting out new things. And then like, oh, that's a new street. Why is that street named that? And then I'll start like digging into something. But like, how do you go about what you want to cover?
So it is more driven by, I think, technology now than when I was like a freelancer and I was just basing it on my own curiosity, because now I have to do stories where I think our readers will actually read. So it's based on like, okay, what's going on Twitter right now? And not just like these like relationship conversations. There's a perpetual gender war on Twitter. So it's not like what's going on Black Twitter. It's more so like looking at trending topics, I follow a lot of advocacy organizations. Like, what are the things that concern them and what are they talking about? So it's looking at that. Facebook also has a really good algorithm. They seem to know what kind of stories I look up. And so I use their kind of, it's not crowdsourcing. They have an aggregator, and they managed to find like the right mix of stories. And I tend to look for inspirational ones, because you do news, it can be very depressing. And so I'm always looking for things where they might be more local stories, but they're like inspiring. Like a little girl saved her family like from a fire. That kind of stuff does really well. Or, you know, we're going to have a Black Barbie in Target and we don't have enough of those, or whatever, you know, something like that, a Black doll. So I look at inspirational stories, and a lot of times it comes up because there are more kind of local Black outlets on Facebook. And I know that Facebook is a big audience for us. So it's like, if it's popping on Facebook, then it might pop on our Essence Facebook. So I kind of think about that. So a lot of it is driven by kind of engagement.
No, I definitely need somebody like you on my team to help with the process. For sure. You talked about covering basically like kind of like positive news, inspirational news, but how do you deal with covering, you know, the hard and difficult topics, especially like those person to person, when you can maybe see a person crying or you see like them like it's getting tough for them to talk about a subject.
So, because that's big. So in terms of like how I deal with it, do you mean like how do I write about it? How do I deal with their emotions? Like how I deal with it on a personal level?
I a couple ways. One, like personal wise, like how do you keep your professional face on, like what, you know, when you're actually having an interview, but then also like just mentally, like afterwards, because sometimes there have been stories that affected me afterwards. I'm done interviewing and I've had to find ways to deal with them. Have you ever, you know, experienced anything like that?
Kind of, yeah. What led to me, and kind of is an understatement. What led to me moving to Milwaukee permanently was, oh my God, actually a year ago, almost today, was when I found out that Jacob Blake was shot, and there was an uprising. There were protests in Kenosha. I was in my bed in Brooklyn, and I heard this happen. I like bought a flight like within the hour and came out here. And so I had to absorb because I went right to the site. It was like the square where a lot of the stuff was happening, like at the courthouse. And I think the first night that I was there, like you could hear like it was the rubber bullets and the sirens. Like I felt like I was in a war zone. And that was a lot, like almost traumatizing. It was close to it. And then and it's an onslaught. And the next day, they had another rally. This was during the day. And Philando Castile's partner, who was in the car with him when he was shot and killed, like executed, basically, she was a couple feet away from me and was having to argue down these armed white vigilantes who were coming there to intimidate the protesters. So I saw on one side the vigilantes, on one side all these Black Lives Matter protesters, including Philando Castile's former partner. And I didn't have to interview her, but I interviewed some of his family. But having to see that, it does, we're human beings, you know what I mean? And I don't think it is a bad thing to let the people know who you're talking to, that you're interviewing, that you are human. This is a tragedy. This is human loss, and there's only so much that that you can do to fake the funk, and you shouldn't have to, especially if you want people to kind of warm up to you and be able to talk to you about it. So I don't pretend that I'm just like this stoic person who is just going to be writing down questions. You can find ways to relate to people, and still tell the story in a full way. So like all of what you're asking me about, I kind of had to deal with in that same weekend. Like one, talking to his family, Jacob Blake's family, literally hearing the shots from Kyle Rittenhouse, because where I was staying was just a couple blocks away from when he killed those protesters. Like I heard the gunshots go off.
Wow.
And I was frightened. And then driving around the next day, I see more people like him, like young whites who are like, step to me and you're gonna get shot. And like they just garden the area like that, and it's scary. So I had to take a day and decompress. I think I went to the lake that day. Lake Michigan was like right near downtown Kenosha. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go to the lake. I'm gonna dip in this water. Take a day to decompress. Find me some Wendy's. I think I found it eventually. It was like a long search, and then get back to work.
I think that's something that we don't talk about as journalists, and why so like this is a high turnover like career, because like you get burnt out. Like you're supposed to cover what's going on in the news, but at the end of the day, like you said, we're humans. We have feelings too. Like seeing somebody cry in front of me, like I'm gonna cry too. I'm too emotional. Like I'm trying to hold my tears in. And then when it comes to politics, just to switch it up, just so we ain't too sad. When it comes to politics, I can't hold my face, and so that's why I try not to cover certain things. I can't hold my face. Like if I know you lying, and I was at the last press conference and I know you lying, I know you're lying, dude. It's so hard for me. That's one thing I can't go into politics, man. My face be like
that's what I was saying earlier when you were in when we were in that room and you were asking questions, I was like, she's just so straightforward. Like I love the energy because we need actual journalists who are going to ask real questions. So yes, I saw it with my own eyes.
That's why sometimes like when I first started on, they would not call on me because I remember this one company said they were bringing jobs to Milwaukee and they were like on 27th and Capitol. That's where a whole bunch of black people live. It's the hood, A.O. Smith. And I'm sitting there, and they're actually in the old A.O. Smith site. And I'm like, for one, I didn't even know y'all were still doing business back here, first of all. And then two, y'all saying you're going to bring people in here. So I was like, so what percentage of the people in this neighborhood are you going to hire? He was like, and it's like the CEO. And I'm like, they did not call on me after that. But I don't care. Like, y'all come to our
neighborhood. You pull the Dave Chappelle. You, like, throw the pitcher of water and then run away.
But we are.
Your job right.
You said what?
That's when you're doing your job right.
Yes, it's definitely nerve-wracking, though. Have you ever had an experience, or are you sometimes ever scared to ask a question? Like, sometimes, depending on the person, depending on the situation, I'd be a little scared, but I get over it. But, like, do you ever get nervous?
Yes, I do. I think I treat it like I do other difficult conversations because, you know, you get nervous when you try to talk to, like, your partner about something rough. So, you kind of start off with kind of the softball ones. And then I get into, okay, but what about X, Y, and Z? And then if you can build a little bit of familiarity, if it is that type of, venue, sometimes you don't got time for all that because you got to ask one question. Mm-hmm. But if it is like a longer interview where you can build a little familiarity, then that's like how I try and ease into it.
So I have to bring up you being a black woman in media because we both are. And honestly, I think it's really cool. And I just want to, like, what does that mean for you to, like, people are looking at you, and especially young black women. I'm looking up to you as well. Like, what does it mean for you to be in this role and to kind of be shifting the way media is covered? Because traditionally we aren't usually covered pretty well, but you to be in this role at a black-owned media company and to have this leadership role, like, what does that feel like for you?
I would say it feels like an honor and exciting in a lot of ways because so often our stories get distorted. And things kind of came full circle because I have like an activist upbringing. And so for me, doing media isn't really just like about a career. It's about shifting narratives that harm us. Mm-hmm. And when I was an undergrad, I went to Emory. We had this newspaper called Emory Will. And I don't think they had a single black person on their staff. It's a predominantly white school, but like no black people on staff. And when they would cover black events, like you could tell like they didn't have black people on staff. And there was one particular event where like they opened up the piece where it was like they had chicken wings catered and they started late and they was dancing. And it was like, this is the most stereotypical shit ever. And so me being a busybody, I needed to graduate and like study for the LSAT. But I was like, you know what? We cannot let this stand. And so a lot of people were upset. Like, okay, so what are we going to do about it? So I gathered a few of my, my homies and other people who were interested. It was like, let's start our own magazine. Like, let's just start our own so we could tell the stories that we need to tell. And that was around the time that Barack Obama was becoming like a serious contender. So we like had a cover story on him. Whatever, you might feel about Barack now. At the time, it was hope and change. And so we were able to just say the things that they were not covering in depth. And so that's why I feel privileged by being able to be at a black website and why I chose to be at a black website because black people read our stuff, I have worked for all types of outlets, but I wanted to go where black people go. And be able to talk about black communists and black socialists, which I put in the print magazine, to be able to talk about black working class people and not just people in the C-suite, not just, it's not just about representation for me. It is uncovering stories so that we can change lives of some of the people that we're covering. So almost a year ago today, like we covered some black women behind the fight for 15. And so they can get, higher minimum wages. So, I like to look at grassroots organizations because they're doing so much work that gets unheralded. And those are the kinds of stories that I get excited about putting in our pages.
Man, that makes me so happy, like, for real, because, like, that's literally what I built my entire business on, or my media company is just literally changing how people view us. Like, just, and it's specifically like, because I'm from Milwaukee, you know how it is. You go anywhere outside of Milwaukee, they gonna judge you just because of, you know, skin color, and they only read, you know, what TMJ4 or Fox 6 is producing, so they already have these images up in their minds, like, of what we are. And so that's kind of like how I kind of go about media, is because people will believe an article that I wrote, not knowing that I wrote it, more than they would believe me saying it out of my mouth, which is really different for me. Like, and I know you could tell that, like, by your name being behind Essence, people give you a little bit more respect. But you still the same writer, you still the same person. And once we start, you know, realizing that, like, there are actual people behind the media that's being produced, and we need to start holding them accountable, I think that's when things can really start to change, because people like, well, this is the facts, this is media. Yes, it may be facts, but they tweaking the facts a little bit. They're only sharing this type of fact, specifically this. Yes, it was fried chicken, but we didn't order it. So, you know what I mean?
It was fried chicken, but there was also like a whole like charcuterie board, like, you know, but why are you honing in on that?
No.
And y'all eat fried chicken too. We in the South. Get out of here.
Fried chicken, Asian people, like Latino people. So why are we focusing on this? Like,
exactly.
Yeah. So I'm going to end this interview because they be kicking me off in a few minutes because I'm not famous yet. Not yet.
Not yet, girl. Not yet, but it's coming.
But how I end all my interviews is, when people rewatch this interview, what do you want them to get from it?
That's a good question. That you can choose your own path and stay disciplined in it, because you're not going to get to where you want to go the same way that everybody's going to get there. Like, I went from dancing and trying to be a background dancer for Sierra. That was like a long shot. But going from that to doing law school to then realizing, you know what, I can do a mix of that, of policy, the serious things and the creative things with this new journey. And I was older. Like, I'm in my 30s, mid to late 30s. And I didn't think about doing this for real until I finished law school. Like, I was already a lawyer on my path to doing that full time. But my journey's not going to look like another journalist's journey, you know? So don't be afraid to step, I know it sounds cliche, but don't be afraid to step out on faith. I had to pray a lot. I had to, like, I cried a little bit. You know, I struggled so many times. But I think you have to listen to where you are in your head, and also be realistic about your talent, and just stay determined with it. And I did, and it worked out, you know. And it may not always work out, but you got to at least try to see if it's going to work out. So, yeah, that's basically it.
I feel like you're talking straight to me. Well, thank you so much. My name is Naisha Stone, this is Carmen Stone, and we're on our last episode of CNS IG Live with Positive Black Women, and we ended with the lovely, lovely Malaika Jabli, and I'm really happy that we met, and I hope to keep you on my network. I think you're so cool.
Like, for real. Absolutely.
Thank you. I really appreciate you. And make sure that y'all follow her. Make sure that y'all follow Essence. And definitely support Black media. If y'all do nothing else, support Black media so we can change it. So thank you so much. And we're going to be in touch. See ya.
Bye.